It's been 1 year to the week that Andor ended season 1. We're all anticipating season 2. I decided to make these Ferrix worker gloves using a pair of $2 gloves I got from Harbor Freight recently. That's right, $2 for these nice pair of gloves. I think I actually improved on them in this process. So to add on to these gloves, I'm going to use EVA foam that I got on clearance from a local Michael's that was just under $7 for this entire roll. I start by measuring out, incorrectly of course, the length that I need. I measured 10 inches on the gloves, but for some reason it should have been closer to 12. I don't know what I did wrong here. I'm not a seamstress, and I think that's the issue. But, cut twice, measure once, figure out how to fix it in the future. So I'm going to attach the EVA foam using this DAP weld cement. I've been using this for close to 10 years. This can has lasted me that long and still has about a little less than a quarter in it. I spread on both the foam and then on the glove. The red part of the glove is a canvas material, so it soaked in pretty good and didn't soak through, which is also good if you want to actually wear these for a cosplay. And here's the two gloves already put together, and you can see when I turn the one over, I'm short by about an inch to an inch and a half there, which isn't too bad. I want them to flare out at the end anyway, so I made a trapezoidal piece here that I'm going to use to flare out the end. Kind of just figuring this out as I go along. This is 6mm thick foam that I had in the shop. I'm going to use this to add some ribs to the forearm portion that I made. I'm just using my scale here as a rough estimate of how wide I want to make them. I only put the cement on one piece, and then what I do is I tack it down, let it sit for a few seconds, and then I pull it back up, and that gives me a good idea of where I need to put the glue on the other piece. It's kind of like a eyeball it in. And then I'm going to here take a longer piece and put an edge right at the base of the forearm there at the back side. And then I decided, because I had a couple extra pieces left over from cutting everything up, that I was going to glue them onto the glove as well. Now, because I cut these all with nice straight edges, they just didn't seem right for what the glove should be. So I got out my Ryobi Dremel tool and started to round the corners, around the edges everywhere. If you're going to do this, go a little slower than I did. You can actually eat into the EVA foam. This is 2mm thick foam on the actual arm piece, and then 6mm on those ribs. You can see where I ate into it a little bit on a couple of the pieces. I'm chalking it up to, I always go with a weathered look to a lot of my stuff, so these have been beaten up. I'm using this Plaid FX primer for EVA foam. In using it, I come to the realization this is just an expensive jar of Mod Podge. It's made by the same company, has the same consistency. I actually compared the two together. I can't tell what the difference is. If you can, let me know in the comments. What's the difference between this and Mod Podge? Both seem to go on the same, seem flexible, and work well. And you can get a Mod Podge jar that's 4 times the size for the same price. I put a nice liberal coat, as you can see on here. And then I set them aside to dry. And I went and I got a little piece of 1-inch thick insulation foam, pink insulation foam. This is what they're going to rest on. If you watch Andor, when you see the wall, each pair of gloves is on its own square. I was going to put a blaster shot hole in here. I decided it's going to be in there, but I'm not going to make it like prominent. At this point, that isn't what I was thinking. One way to really age a piece of this foam is to take a heat gun to it. If you've already cut sections, you can see how the heat gun actually will melt and give it a little more contour. Wear a respirator when doing this. The fumes off of this stuff is not good for you. It kind of works like EVA foam, where if it already has a score and you hit it with a heat gun, that score is going to open up. And if it doesn't have a score, you're going to create a film. But if you heat it too much, as you can see what I did on purpose, it actually gives it a indentation. In the show, it looks like the gloves are a little bigger than the square, so this is made to let the gloves overhang maybe about 4 or 5 inches. The wall is like this brownish beige color, I guess, this or grayish beige, light tan. So I'm taking Mod Podge and I'm covering this up. And then I'm going to take some decorative sand and mix it in with the Mod Podge to just give it a little texture, as if this is like a rough stucco style wall panel. So I let that dry overnight, and then I take a mix of brown, white, and yellow, and I got this really light tan color. I find that it looks white or off-white on this camera, but it's actually a little darker than that, and it'll dry even a little darker than that. And I'm going to do a couple of washes over it to darken it up. You got to make sure you dab it into each of those little crevices if you're going to put those into the foam. Also, make sure you mix up enough, because when you're mixing like I do, if you don't mix up enough, getting the same consistency and color each time, more power to you. I'm not good at doing that. Here, now that I've got it completely painted, I just start adding a little more brown and some black to the paint that I have left over, and I'm just adding some details. Then I set that to the side and I start painting red on these ribs that I had glued onto the glove. I'm using these apple barrel craft paints. Even with the primer that I had put on here, it didn't seem to paint on as well as I'd like. So I figure I'm going to have to do a couple coats at this point. It actually ended up being about 4 coats. 3 coats of this apple barrel color, which looked okay, but for some reason I could not get it to coat the way I wanted to. So there was always a little bit of black showing through. And what I did was After I got these done and set them aside, I went and got the actual FX paint that goes over the FX primer, and I paint it with that. So there's actually two different reds on the finished gloves. Not that you can tell from a distance, but the second red is actually a little lighter, and I like it a little more. So after I was working on those and let those dry, I moved back on to the panel to add a little hook to hang the gloves with. All this is just a little gold hook that I had in my shed. Pulled it out, and pink foam is very, very light and easy to poke through, so this screw is not going to hold. So what I did is I made the hole just a tad bit oversized, and I filled it with a strong hot glue, and then put the hook in and let it set. Once it's set, it was pretty firmly in place. These gloves don't weigh much, so it's not like it's gonna have a lot of weight on them when it's on the wall. And now I realize I need to somehow attach these to the hook. I take a little bit of paracord, measure out about 8 inches for each one. Just took a little screwdriver and poked the hole into the EVA foam. Pushed the paracord through both sides, or both gloves rather. Tied a simple knot. Okay, not quite that simple. Tied a knot, pulled it tight, and hung them up on the wall. Here is the finished product sitting on the wall next to some of my other Andor projects that are either finished or in some stage of being worked on. I hope you got something out of this. If you did, I wouldn't mind if you gave me a like, and if you're not, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.